Hello, it's Warren here, and I'm doing a book review on this guy, What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy by James Apology. So I liked the book. I thought it was quite good. Obviously, it had its flaws, just like any book. So let's go into just a brief overview. Now, the contents of the book are basically that video games are worthwhile, and that's the kind of central message of it, and how video games can be used as tools to facilitate learning in young people, or people of any age, really. So I've been trying to convince my mother of that for like a couple of years. So G does it in this book, hopefully. Now, on that point, I thought that some of the strengths of the book were that it had a very accessible language to it, which I thought was quite nice. So I could give the book to my mom, and I think that she would be able to understand it, even though she doesn't have any background in linguistics or some other academic field. And I thought that was pretty good because it made the book very easy to read, and it was very easy to understand. G uses great examples that are always concrete, and most of the time he relates sort of his example about like semiotic domains, and he relates it to a classroom setting or a particular course. Usually science is what he brings it up in. So I thought that was one of the big strengths of the book because it was very easy to follow, and it was a good read. And he avoids using jargon. He does use a few words like semiotic domains, affinity groups, and words like this. But like I said, he always uses a concrete example to back him up, which is great. Now, some of the weaknesses are sort of related to those strengths, as it were. And so one of the problems was that I didn't really know what the book was. Was it an academic book, or was it just supposed to be kind of a general, kind of hand wavy sort of deal. It's not that bad. He never claims that the book's trying to be a hardcore research about saying, video games can teach kids X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, it's sort of like, well, what am I reading? Because a lot of academic articles cite this book as a reference, but there's no research in it. And the furthest he goes is he does an interview with somebody, with a young person about their experience playing EverQuest. So not a lot of research into it, and I think that the book probably could have used maybe some kind of more statistics or something showing me the evidence, right? Other than the fact that, oh hey, this guy thinks that video games are kind of cool because his kid plays them. So I thought that was one of the weaknesses of the book. Another thing is that he tends to repeat himself. I noticed that there were a few times where G sort of mentions, like in chapter 5, he mentions about how there's different approaches to solving one problem, and video games are really good for that. Like Metal Gear Solid is the example that he brings up. But then later on, when he's talking about cultural identities, he also talks about this kind of same sort of multiple solution approach. And it doesn't really seem like he's making a new topic. So it would have been nicer to be more explicit if he could have said, oh hey, like I brought up in chapter 5 that I'm not talking about in chapter 6. But I did get the feeling that it was sort of like, oh, this isn't really new, but I'm going to try and make it new. So could have done without that. But now the biggest criticism that I had of the whole book was that Tails from the Sonic the Hedgehog series is not a squirrel, but he is actually a fox. I was very surprised because G actually mentions that he's played every single game that he talks about in the book, except for EverQuest, which is great, but yet he somehow seemed to miss the fact that Tails is actually a fox. So it's kind of funny to point out that G probably actually didn't really consult the affinity group for the Sonic the Hedgehog series, and his own design grammar is a bit out of whack. But also surprising is that this is the revised edition of the book, so everybody read it and nobody seemed to catch on. So that was just something that I noticed. I thought that the book could have been done better, and it would have made it seem a bit more credible. In that sense. But overall, the book I thought was great. It's a great introduction into the field of game studies, and it gives the reader sort of a very general connection to some of the more difficult terms with good explanations. So great introductory book, but all it is just a sort of a general, hey, games can sort of do stuff, but we don't really know exactly what they can do.